Hi, I'm Ann Parker. I'm a past national president. Tonight, we're going to go over the affiliation agreement, the Constitution, and the bylaws. The affiliation agreement, your chapter is asked to sign with the officers each year after elections. Please don't ever sign this last page without reading it. The affiliation agreement is a statement of relationship between the national organization and the chapter to ensure that all levels of the organization work together effectively and efficiently. Section 1. Our organization is a corporation based out of Washington, D.C. The executive body at the national level is the NEB, the NEB, which is charged with carrying out the functions of the organization between annual conventions. Department, we have 3 departments: Ohio, Minnesota, and Michigan. 1.3, the chapter shall mean the entity charged with carrying on the corporation's mission at the local level within a geographic area within the chartering application is approved by national. 1.4 defines binding arbitration between national and the chapter. 1.5, the department and chapter standards are those criteria developed by nationals, the departments, and the chapters, and utilized by national to determine if a department or chapter meets the minimum requirements to remain a chapter or a department in good standing. 1.6 talks about intellectual properties, which are the tangible assets of the corporation. Number 2, representation of the parties. National represents it's a corporation validly existing and duly organized under the laws of the District of Columbia. 2.2 says that each party to this agreement warrants that they have the authority to enter into such. Number 3, agreements by national. 3.1, national shall provide fair and impartial leadership. 3.2, a national agrees that it'll facilitate and support the departments and chapters in all activities consistent with the goals and missions of the corporation. National will provide leadership, guidance, instruction, and training to enable them to carry out their duties through the use of modern technology, including all necessary tax forms, the 990, which must be filed by January 15th of each year. For most chapters, this will be the 990N, the postcard. If your chapter's income for the year is $50,000 or less, you will do the postcard filing. You will complete all of the compliance documents as required by national. That's what you're agreeing to do. 3.4, national gives the departments and chapters a non-exclusive right to use all the trademarks, service marks, etc., as well as copyrighted material owned by national. Fees must be paid by national in accordance with our rules if a chapter chooses to use the chapter logo as a fundraising document. They must apply to the national president for that permission, and then they must pay the national organization 25% of the profits of that particular fundraising item that carries the national logo on it. 3.5 provides that the department chapter are each in compliance with the agreement and with the applicable provision of the code during the term of this agreement, which is 1 year. 3.6, national agrees to consistently solicit a broad range of input from the departments and chapters regarding all matters. Article 4 deals with the departments. As I said, we only have Michigan, Ohio, and Minnesota, and I would refer you to your specific departments to go over the department's structure within the chapters in its department. The chapters on section 5.1 agree to promote the corporation's mission. 5.2, to comply with the governing documents. To provide national with a current mailing address. 5.3. 5.4, it agrees to provide each member with a copy of all the governing documents. which they can find on the national website. 5.5, the chapter agrees to prepare and file all required registration statements with the appropriate state organizations. On our national website, under resources for chapters, you will find listed by state the state requirements. 5.6, chapters will operate on the same fiscal year as national, which is September 1 through August 31st. 5.7, the chapter will submit an annual renewal of this agreement along with all required documents for compliance. 5.8, the chapter agrees to pay the Veterans Affairs Voluntary Service Fee, which is a part of compliance, by January 15th. 5.9 talks about the dissolution of a chapter with all of its assets being transferred to the department or to the national organization, depending on what they come under. 6 talks about assets and liability. There's a responsibility on the part of national to protect the corporation's name, reputation, and its tax exempt status. Number 7 talks about intellectual property. All corporation intellectual property, including the colors as defined in the Code of Conduct, shall remain at all times exclusive property of the national corporation. Talks about that the national logo can't be modified in any way. All intellectual property must be used by chapters in a professional manner, and it reserves the right to request samples of intellectual property from whom it may determine compliance with these terms. So national also reserves the right to prohibit the use of any intellectual property, as well as to impose any other sanction at its sole discretion in accordance with the use of intellectual properties. Number 8, this agreement will be renewed annually, submitting the required documentation to the national organization, and a failure to do so, the chapter action about suspension, which is covered in number 9, will be invoked if documents are not furnished. So suspension and revocation of the charter granted by national shall remain in full force effect until its annual renewal paperwork is due following the date of this agreement. Suspension, national acts through the National Executive Board may suspend a department or a chapter's charter if the majority of the NEB, after investigation, determined that the department or chapter is not in compliance with this agreement. It can also suspend the charter of the department or chapter if all paperwork is not completed by January 15th. Revocation can also occur for consistent failure to adhere to the affiliation agreement. 9.5 talks about the disbandment and the liquidation of assets should a department or chapter close. Number 10 talks about conflict resolution. The parties agree that all disputes arising out of or relating to the application of this agreement shall be submitted to a binding arbitration within the state where the national president resides. 10.2, the parties agree that binding arbitration is a condition precedent to the initiation of legal activities, and the laws of this agreement are those of the District of Columbia, where our organization has its corporation headquarters. Number 11 talks about modification of the agreement, and no amendment or modification of the agreement shall be binding upon the parties until it's made in writing and duly executed by all parties. Here again, I'd like you to read this after you finish this training, and I'd like you to read it each year before you sign it if you are an officer. We're going to talk about the Constitution next. It is the document that outlines who we are. So having said that, Section 1 says our name is Blue Star Mothers of America Incorporated. Section 2 says we are domiciled corporation in the District of Columbia. Section 3 says we'll exist in perpetual existence. Number 4 says the corporation should be non-political, non-sectarian, non-discriminatory, and non-profit, and shall not be used for personal or partisan purposes. Article 2 talks about the mission. I will let you read that for yourself, but to understand that we are supporting the United States of America Armed Forces, our veterans, to advocate for them, to assist the families of the fallen, and to uphold the principles of freedom, justice, equal rights, and to defend the Constitution of the United States from all enemies, foreign and domestic. Article 3, we are not a stock corporation. We don't have stock. We don't pay dividends. Section 2 of Article 3 talks about the income may not be distributed to an officer, member, or any private person during the life of the corporation, meaning none of our income can support or assist or aid any particular member. Section 3, no loans can be made or advances to any person, be it an officer or director. Section 4, no substantial part of the activities shall be carrying out of propaganda or otherwise trying to influence legislation. So we don't have any direct influence on Congress. Doesn't mean you can't write your congressman, but we don't come to our congressman with lobbyists and things as some other nonprofits do. Section 5, notwithstanding any provision, the corporation shall not directly carry on any activity that would prevent it from carrying a 501(c) out. Definition. Section 6, in the event of the dissolution, it talks about what would happen to the funds. Article 4, an individual is eligible for membership in the corporation if she is a mother, meaning a woman who has filled the role of birth mother, adoptive mother, stepmother, foster mother, grandmother, legal guardian, or a person who's currently serving in any branch of the United States of America, has served or been honorably discharged. So all those people listed, the mother or one who served as a birth mother of a person who is currently serving in any branch of the armed forces, who has served and been honorably discharged from the armed forces of the United States, and is a citizen or legal resident, meaning, or alien, meaning they have like a green card, has been granted authorization to live and work in the United States on a permanent basis, living in the United States, or a citizen living outside the United States. Article 5, governing body. Section 1, the supreme governing authority is the National Convention body. The National Convention body is comprised of the national officers and officers, representatives from the departments and chapters. The national president will reside over the convention. The National Convention may be held in any state or territory, including the District of Columbia. The corporation's governing documents, as that term shall hereafter be the Constitution, the bylaws, the code of conduct, and the affiliation agreement for all chapters. Article 6, powers of the organization. The corporation may acquire by gift, purchase, or otherwise, and dispose of any asset to which it has. Article 7, the officers of the corporation shall be elected or appointed in the manner as defined in the bylaws. The National Executive Board are your elected officers, the department presidents, and the 3 most recent past presidents still retaining membership in Blue Star Mothers of America. If any of the 3 most recent past national presidents still retaining their membership cannot or will not serve on the NEB, her position on the NEB will remain vacant and not be filled. All other past national presidents will serve in its advisory board only to the NEB, but will retain their right to vote at National Convention. The National Executive Board shall administer the activities and business of the corporation. Article 9 talks about associate members, people who don't qualify for membership under the eligibility article can join as an associate. They pay no dues, nor do they hold any right to office, vote, or be a delegate to National Convention. At one point, our organization had a Blue Star Dads Association. It is currently not active. Article 10 it talks about our fiscal year is September 1 through August 31st. And that is our Constitution. Please read it thoroughly after you've attended this training. Last but not least are our bylaws. They tell how things are done. So we have Article 1, which is the name of the corporation and how it's governed. The following documents in the order: the United States Constitution, the Code of Conduct, Title 36, Chapter 305, Blue Star Mothers of America, and the following organizational documents: Constitution, bylaws, Code of Conduct, and the affiliation agreements for the national department and chapters between them and the NEB. The most current version of Robert's Rules of Order shall be the source of parliamentary procedure and used at all levels for the corporation, and will be governed and administered by Article 5 of the Code of Conduct. These bylaws can be amended every 3 years by the delegates at the National Convention. An emergency bylaws proposal may be submitted in a non-bylaws year in the event governing documents would be in conflict with the change of local, state, or federal laws. Any proposed amendments to these bylaws would need to be sent out to the body 30 days prior to convention. Amendments should be reviewed by the executive board and the corporation's legal counsel to make sure they are accurate. Amendments to the governing documents shall take effect at the close of National Convention, which they are adopted. With a 2/3 vote of the convention body, a specific amendment may become effective immediately. Article 3, a member is considered to be in good standing if their dues have been paid, they adhere to the governing documents, the membership oath, which they signed before joining, and have not received any written discipline within the last 6 months from either the national, the chapter, or the department. The corporation does not allow members at large. All members must be attached to a chapter, not necessarily requiring them to live in an area where they are a member. Members may attend meetings and function as a corporation with the exception of disciplinary hearings and executive sessions of either the National Executive Board, the department, or the chapter level. Section 3, a member of a disbanded chapter, as long as they're in good standing, may during the period while her dues are still active, transfer to a new chapter. A member may be expelled under Section 4 for subversive activities or behavior unbecoming or harmful to the corporation. Disciplinary procedures as set forth in the Code of Conduct shall be used as guidelines for termination of membership. Grounds for termination include, but shall not be limited to, failure to maintain requirements for membership, failure to uphold the objectives, purposes, and policies of the organization, mishandling of organizational funds and donations, and consistent disruptive behavior that obstructs the organization's ability to function effectively. Membership dues are required for annual membership. Chapters that do not belong to a department will submit 50% of the dues collected to the national organization. By the same token, a chapter that belongs to a department, the allocation is different, with that 1/2 of it going to the chapter treasurer, 1/4 to the department, and 1/4 to the national organization. All memberships expire every year on August 31st. Dues not paid by September 1st will place the member in a lapsed status. Dues must be paid by January 15th for the lapsed member to be able to attend national conventions. Lapsed members who don't pay their dues by January 15th will have their membership of the corporation canceled, and they can only be reinstated when dues are paid. Organizational divisions are covered in Article 4. So the National Executive Board is considered the board of directors for the corporation, and all officers at all levels of the corporation must sign an annual affiliation agreement. Section 4 says that no chapter or department can be named after a person. Section 5, all properties, including flags, history, records, minutes, etc., of a Disbanded chapter will be reverted to the department. In the case of no department, the national organization will receive all of these matters. Section 6, a member in good standing must be notified in writing at least 15 days prior to a meeting for a chapter deciding to disband. The NEB must be notified within 15 days of such meeting as to the results. In the case of a department, all chapter presidents in good standing must be notified of a proposal to disband within 15 days prior to the meeting, and the NEB must be notified within 15 days of that meeting. Section 7, a chapter may be reinstated upon the application of at least 5 paying members. The department may be reinstated on application of at least 3 chapters in good standing. Article 6, the Executive Board, National Executive Board, the Department Executive Board will meet within 24 hours of the adjournment of their convention and immediately before the opening of that convention. Section 2, special meetings of the NEB may be called by the national president on request or not less than 5 members of the National Executive Board. Special meetings of the NEB may be called by the department president upon the request of not less than 5 members of the DEB. Such meetings may be either face-to-face or by conference call. Section 3, the National Executive Board, the Department Executive Board may be called by the national president on request of not less than 5 members of the NEB. They may hold these meetings as necessary to transact all corporation business, not less than quarterly. A quorum on the National Executive Board is 7, on the Department Executive Board is 5, and on 3 on the chapter board. Special meetings notice must be given to those that are going to be attending the meeting in advance. The auxiliaries, as we talked about earlier, are the Big Dipper, the Educational Assistant Grant. We currently don't have a Dads Association. We talked about the gavel as being the past national presidents, auxiliary, and associates who help us work the mission but have no rights such as voting or being able to be a convention delegate or to hold an office. Article 5 talks about charters. 3 or more chapters may submit a charter application to be a department. Upon approval, the chapter of not less than 5 members shall be chartered by the national president and the national 4th VP. Upon charting a new chapter, the 4th VP should notify the department president if the chapter is part of a department. Chapters formed before 1990 should not be required to have a minimum number of members. Those required after must maintain 5 members minimum. Each of those in that case would need to hold an office. The executive board at every level shall ensure compliance of the governing documents, all laws enacted by Congress, by state and local governments. Section 6, executive boards every level shall consist of a minimum of 5 elected officers, including 2 financial officers. Chapters shall maintain the same 5 officers as required for their additional chartering, being a president, 1st VP, recording secretary, financial secretary, and treasurer. If one of the 5 officers should resign during the fiscal year, that officer shall be replaced in order for the chapter to be compliant. Annual conventions, Article 7. There must be an annual convention held annually for the purpose of electing new officers, acting on proposals, resolutions, motions, etc., conducting the business as may be brought before the body, and planning for the upcoming year. Departments also must have an annual convention. Section 2 calls for a call to convention to be issued 60 days before that convention, and all conventions for the departments must be held between September 1 and December 31st. The national convention, all members should be notified, a formal invitation issued. With the exception of the national president, each member of the National Executive Board and Department Executive Board shall be a delegate to their respective conventions. Each department chapter president shall be a delegate at national convention. National convention shall be held annually within 60 days prior to the close of the fiscal year on August 31st. Section 6 talks about each chapter's delegate entitlement will be checked by the national first VP and verified at the registration desk. Only verified delegates will be issued a badge to be a delegate, and delegate badges may not be transferred if a delegate cannot attend a session or departs the convention early. Each chapter is allowed one delegate for every 10 members in good standing or fraction thereof. All delegates must be in good standing. All chapter presidents are entitled to be a delegate, and the one delegate for every 10 member is in addition to the chapter president. Should the chapter president not be able to attend, no one else can take her spot. Section 8, the proceedings of National Convention shall be reviewed by the National Executive Board prior to distribution. The proceedings should be distributed within 45 days of the close of convention. It should include things like chapter reports, election results, financial rules, and financial reports. The proceedings of all department conventions will be sent to the NEB no later than 45 days after the close of the department convention. Section 10, when an officer's term is over or she has left the position, everything that she has must be turned over to her predecessor. The installation of officers must be completed before the convention closes. Article 8, there are no elected, appointed, salaried officers or salaried chairs. The NEB, the National Executive Board, can have the discretion to hire staff to have responsibility for particular administrative matters such as shredding of documents. Section 3, expenses incurred by national officers and chairs will be paid as we talked about in the financial policies. Section 4, the national executive officers shall receive sums to cover general expenses as outlined in our policies. At the National Executive Board, Department Executive Board, the National Finance Committee or the Department Finance Committee shall prepare financial policies and a budget for the upcoming year. The financial policies and budgets will be voted on before the convention body. Upon acceptance of the convention body, the financial policies and budget for the upcoming year shall be entered into the minutes of the convention. There must be a yearly audit on the national level. Copy of the national audit must be included in the minutes of the convention, and departments and chapters will also have an annual review of their financial records. Section 7, reasonable travel expenses of the department president to the convention and national executive board meetings are covered by their respective departments. Article 9, all office members nominated for office shall be members in good standing. There's no campaigning. The National Financial Secretary, the National First VP will verify the identity of each voting delegate. The national president should call for the doors of the convention to be secured by the sergeant at arms before balloting and elections begin. No individual will be permitted to enter or leave the hall during these elections. On the national level, Section 4, a nomination committee appointed by the national president will receive nominations and qualifications for each position to be distributed to the membership no later than 30 days before convention. Nominations can be made by the floor, but those members will need to be verified before the election occurs. Nomination speeches should be no longer than 2 minutes and limited to specific qualifications. Section 5, nominees under extreme circumstances, illness, accident, family emergency, not able to be present to be considered for the office may submit a letter to the NEB or to the DEB stating the reason. And once this is received, the candidate will be added to the ballot. Section 6, delegates must be present in the convention hall to vote. There are no proxies. The national president represent any state. All the other officers can represent any department or chapter. Election of officers by this ballot. There should be a judge and 3 tellers at national elections. An officer of the National Executive Board or Department Executive Board shall hold a term of 1 year or until a successor is elected. The term of office begins immediately upon completion of the installation ceremony. An officer may serve 1 additional term or year in the same office, whether consecutively or non-consecutively. Now, on the chapter level, each office is still for a period of 1 year, but these officers will serve until a successor is elected. So there are no term limits on the chapter level. The national officers have the following qualifications. The national president must have served as an elected officer for at least 1 year, full year on the NEB. If she holds any position such as Big Dipper or yearbook position or financial secretary, at any other level, she must resign that position immediately upon being elected to the higher offices. The vice president shall be nominated from national department chapter officers, and the newly elected national treasurer or national financial secretary must have served in a financial position in the department of chapter or have accounting or financial background. Talks about in section 2, the department officers. And last but not least, we cover vacancies. Elected officers. The National Executive Board shall declare a national executive elective office vacation upon a resignation, death, or after 3 months of inactivity. The NEB shall appoint a qualified replacement with a 2/3 majority vote of the entire National Executive Board. Written notification of that vote and its results must be sent to the department chapters within 30 days. Appointed officers and chairs. The president, any level, shall declare a vacancy upon resignation, death, or after 3 months of inactivity, and appoint a qualified replacement appointed officer or chairman. Notification must be sent to the department chapters within 30 days. Temporary vacancy. If an elected officer at any level of the corporation is temporarily unable to fill her office, then the applicable executive board may by majority vote choose a qualified replacement to temporarily take over the responsibility of that office. If an appointed officer is temporarily unable to fill her duty, then the applicable president shall appoint a qualified replacement to temporarily take over the responsibilities of that office. I would challenge you to read all these documents for yourself and get in contact with any member of our National Executive Board if you have questions in that regard. Thank you for your attention.